Welcome, collectors and friends, to another edition of Trading Card Therapy. I'm your host, the Dr. Leighton Sheldon, and we have a wonderful episode planned today. I do have a guest joining us as we are creeping closer to episode 100. This is episode number 89. Please hang tight for just a couple of moments before we bring on Mike Baker of MBA Authenticated. Before we bring on Mike, I wanted to show off just a couple things today. And this beauty is recently back from PSA. It was bought from a fresh collection. This is a T205 Thai Cobb. It is graded a PSA 3, and as you can see, it is very well centered. Now, it's got fairly even corner wear, but that's not uncommon on a 3. And it's got maybe the slightest bit of a wrinkle right there. But I feel like this is a perfect card to show off, because I wanted to get Mike's opinion to know if this would be considered high-end for the grade of a 3. So we'll bring this back maybe in just a few moments when we bring on Mike Baker. This has a nice clean back. It is a Piedmont, which is a fairly common back, of course, for T205s. And it's got a really great look to it. I've seen 3s that look a lot worse, but that doesn't mean, of course, that this one's considered high-end for the grade. And I also know this from being a collector myself. We're usually not the best judge of our own cards, as we all think our cards are the best examples for the grade. So the other thing I want to show off, and if you've been watching us for a while, you've seen the first part of this find, and if not, welcome to our show. I am the owner of Just Collect, and Just Collect sponsors, of course, Trading Card Therapy. So recently we had the good fortune of buying some fresh worldwide gum Gaudy cards from 1933 and 1934 that included 2 Babe Ruths and a Lou Gehrig. That full story is on our blog at blog.justcollect.com. The coolest part about the collection, though, is originally I was planning to go to Canada and kind of make like a buy trip of it. And I don't want to misquote, but he explained to us that the closest traffic light to his home was 300 miles away. So he said, I really have your doubts. I really have doubts about you finding me. And then to be honest, I'm a little bit worried about you getting home. So needless to say, we were thrilled when they decided to ship in those cards to us. But that was only the first batch. Well, gang, if you are watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see the cards, of course. And if you're listening on Apple and Spotify, thank you so much for listening and checking out Trading Card Therapy. But if you'd like to actually see some of the cool cards we show off, my advice, check us out on YouTube under the Just Collect name on YouTube. And we put all of our Trading Card Therapy episodes there. So without further ado, this is just a handful of the additional worldwide gums we just got. So a Jimmy Fox, a Bill Dickey, a Mo Berg, the Spy, Eddie Collins, Joe Cronin, Burley Grimes, and Leo DeRocher. They kind of range in condition from lower grade to like mid-ish, but still these cards, back in the day were a little bit more plentiful and definitely not as expensive as they are today. And then to me, the cooler part of this second group is just the sheer volume. I'll kind of show it off like this. So this is the I believe it's from the 1930s. I think it's 33, but it's the Ice King set. But these are all Ice Kings, fresh to the hobby. And I think the first group, we might have had a low grade, Howie Morenz. This group, there's some Hall of Famers. The full story about, there we go. That's the number 1 card in the set. The full story, like I said, about this second group will be available very soon on our blog at blog.justcollect.com. But as you folks know out there, we're not only always appraising cards, but we're always buying. And we like sharing the stories with you folks, because this one in particular really resonated with me. They were kind of telling us not to come, a little bit worried about us finding them and obviously doing a deal. So we're very happy that they took confidence in us in the process, and we provided them our FedEx number for them to ship in their collection, and the rest is history. So without further ado, we're going to bring on Mike Baker of MBA Authenticated. Thanks so much for joining us today, Mike.
You bet, Leighton. Good to be here.
I've known you a long time, and even though you might think like, hey, why am I going to ask a question or two? Keep in mind what we're trying to do is provide some entertainment, of course, but basically we want to make sure that, we have some fun and we also provide value to folks. while we're doing this. And, the first place I wanted to start is, Mike, where'd you generally grow up, and were you a sports fan and a collector while you were a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California. I was a sports fan of the Angels, not the Dodgers. I say that because my entire family is a Dodger fan. And then subsequently, I moved to Northern California and became a Giants fan. So I've been a Giants fan since 2010, and that's really irked the family dynamic for sure. So, but it's been good. But yeah,
that's cool. And were you a collector as well as being a sports fan?
No, I wasn't as much a collector. I think I fit the profile of playing with sports cards as a kid, and doing the bike spoke thing, flipping them. And then as sports and girls became more in teenage years, I lost track of baseball cards or whatever. And then when I got my job actually at PCGS, and a long time ago, 1989, I went to the Long Beach Coin and Card Show and saw how vibrant at that time, which was really not even be considered vibrant, but the card market was doing good. And I saw a guy buy a 75 Brent from one table, undid it in a screw down and put it in a card saver, and then made like $100 profit, like walking 20 feet. And I thought, wow, this game's changed big time. So that kind of reintroduced myself to the what's going on in today's card market, or back then it was, and it kind of reignited my passion. And so that subsequently led to me going to more card shows after that, having fun. And then PSA started 2 years later, and then the rest is history from there.
Interesting. So, Mike, when you were at PCGS, were you already like a coin guy, or were you learning about coins when you were at the company?
I wasn't a coin guy at all. I actually didn't even know there was a massive coin numismatic presence, and that was even a hobby, and I was hired as a coin encapsulator, a coin sealer, back then when PCGS had two shifts, much like PSA. It was just an ungodly amount of submissions, and I was on one of those shifts as a 20-year-old kid, and I was fortunate enough to kind of learn the inside stuff, the inside scoop, so to speak, and go to some of the local shows at least, and kind of get up to speed for what I had heard was coming down the pike with the start of PSA, or the concept of PSA coming on board. And so I wanted to definitely be at the forefront of that conversation. I didn't want to be a coin sealer for the rest of my life, so to speak, and saw another opportunity and seized it. So my passion was definitely in cards.
That's really cool, Mike. So you were there, it sounds like, when PSA really first opened its doors. Yeah,
100%. I was there. PSA opened up in 91 of June, and I was there already almost 2 calendar years prior to that in the coin division, understanding all the dynamics that were going on with coins and how they were received and how they were graded, encapsulated. So similar process, just a different widget.
Sure. No, that's a really good way to put it. I'm curious, being at PSA in the early days, what were those days like? Because obviously PSA as we know it today isn't quite what we knew it to be back then.
Yeah, it's not even close. I mean, back then it was, entrepreneurial. It was brand new conceptually. There was no, day and night shift. It was, what we can do today? There's only a couple hours worth of work, and at that time I was doing, customer service, shipping, encapsulation, grading. There wasn't enough cards coming in to warrant anybody else to, be on board basically. So it was,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was crazy times to think about where it's at today to where it started then, for sure.
That's wild, Mike. So I'm curious if you recall, at what moment, or was there a pivotal moment, meaning coming back from a big convention, or all of a sudden you had a special and tons of cards came flooded in? Was there an aha moment for you in the early days of PSA when you realized, like, OMG, this is here to stay?
Yes, there was. Short answer, yes. The longer answer is that while PSA started conceptually, the dealers did not want us to be, they didn't want their power to go to anybody else, especially a kid from Southern California telling them how their cards were or weren't about, condition or authenticity or whatever it may be. And so opening up a Sports Collector's Digest and seeing Say No to Grading forever, it seemed like forever at the time, because that went on for, you remember, that was 5, 6, 7 years, maybe. I don't know. I don't know maybe about 5, 6 years. But the aha moment was, in my recollection, was going to a White Plains show and taking submissions for the first time and then bringing them home to encapsulate and whatever. And that was the first time that I thought, hey, wow, people are actually submitting cards to us in person. We're taking them back for, I think, like $6 or $8 or whatever it was back then. And this can work. We can actually make money going to shows and getting the word out there, because the word at the time was so anti. It was like we really had to work on the collector and kind of do the reverse end of trying to change the marketplace perception of why grading was a necessity at the time, for sure. And obviously it's proved to be, true right now, because, liquidity and authentication is the main driver of the market, in my opinion, for sure. So.
Yeah, well, a lot wrapped up in there, Mike. And the first thing is I wanted to say on behalf of myself and many collectors out there, even though both of you and I do this for a living, is thank you. And the reason why I say thank you is because, make no mistake, I've come across many a dealer, Mike, you have as well, probably more than me, where folks are like, I don't need a grading company to tell me what grade my card is.
Yeah.
And what I always say is, no one's suggesting that's the case. What I am suggesting is, if you'd like to feel more comfortable, more confident, trading cards across states, right? Buying it on the blind, even though an 8, we also know an 8's not an 8 is not an 8, etc. They're not all equal. But the point is, I've always looked at it as, especially if you're talking to folks who understand the jewelry market a little bit more than maybe, let's say, baseball cards, is meaning a lot of men have bought engagement rings, and certainly a lot of ladies understand jewelry. So if you go buy a diamond, that diamond often comes with some sort of paperwork that's graded. Now, maybe if you consider yourself to be astute and an expert on diamonds and condition, you don't really look at the paperwork, but you still look at the diamond. And so my point is, in terms of saying thank you, is you've really allowed folks like myself, Mike, who do this for a living, to be able to sell a card for a lot of money, not necessarily sight unseen, because, right, they still see the card in the holder, front and back, so on and so forth. And believe me, we're going to talk about MBA later and how it plays into what's going on with eye appeal and all that good stuff, in the marketplace. But you really did pave the way, similar to the way that Mr. Mint, Alan Rosen, may he rest in peace, paved the way for guys like myself to travel, right, hit the road and buy cards and appraise them and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Mike, you were there at the earliest days of PSA when, candidly, most dealers were saying no. And even though I did get why they were saying no, it is very apparent today why I'm glad that not only, of course, is grading still around, but it's thriving, Mike, because it's allowed folks to spend more money comfortably and confidently on cards. Any thoughts on that?
You just summed it up right there. I mean, back in the day, there was no internet. So you were reading the back pages of classified, ads in the SCD, trying to determine what should and shouldn't be bought. And, the guy was, writing or describing how the card's near mint or mint, and then you get it and it has a wrinkle or a crease or it's trimmed or whatever it may be at the time. And so grading has been, in my opinion, definitely important to creating that comfortability for people to, transact across the world now. Now you can, with images and, you can pretty much see digitally what we would never have been able to see. You were really taking, the benefit of the doubt or the guy's word for it, that you were getting what was written that you were getting. So it's definitely helped the transactionality of everything and the comfort level, for sure. And even then it still has its blips, but nothing's perfect. But it would, without grading, I think this whole business would be in a different spot, in my opinion, for sure.
Listen, very well put, Mike. So moving on from PSA, because honestly, I feel like I can keep you forever talking about the good old days of PSA. So for those that don't know or have heard of a company called GAI, I believe, was something that was also one of the early adapters of grading. Not just of grading, but I believe you folks were the first to grade and authenticate unopened packs of cards, predating PSA by a number of years. And a mutual friend of ours, Mark Murphy, the baseball card kid, I know was instrumental in that process. And I actually remember now what I was talking about earlier today. So when it comes to these episodes, Mike, we try to have some entertainment, but we also try to have education. And so I know myself, for example, have been asked over the years about GAI holders, probably more pertaining to packs than cards. That being said, I've been asked about both. And I know that you were at a time affiliated with the company. And so I'm curious for collectors that are out there that are maybe thinking about buying, a card. And I actually just had this happen recently. A very good friend of mine asked me in the recent Heritage auction, there was a number of old GAI holders of packs from the Rounders collection. And he asked me some of my thoughts and all that kind of good stuff. And so I'm curious, Mike, if I'm just an average collector and I see you at a convention and you're promoting MBA, what do you tell someone who asks you about global if they're thinking about buying a card or, for that matter, a pack in one of the old holders?
Right now, I mean, being that the company's been out of business for 15 plus years, and there's no database, there's no anything, it's kind of troubled waters relative to cards in particular, as I've seen multiple counterfeit flips, counterfeit holders, which we've alerted eBay to be. But what's the biggest scam? To take a service that doesn't have a database, there's no way to check, and people, and still major auction houses like Heritage still hold a company's, card or product that's been out of business for, almost 2 decades. So, and weirdly, for all the shows that I go to, I'm rarely asked anything about global packs. You just don't, especially packs, because you don't see packs at shows very often. I was surprised to see the level of packs and a number of material that were in the Heritage auction. So I thought it was kind of cool to wow, that was a long time ago, And but cards, no, I just don't. People don't come up to me in the couple conversations, maybe less than a handful that I've had. We're not putting stickers on a card that the company's been out of business. So it's really just, it's an opinion that's been given, and fortunately or unfortunately, the product still is being held in major auction houses. So there's enough confidence from the auction house collectible experts to say, we'll hold this one or we won't that one, or however it's vetted, basically. But I can see on eBay in particular, I would be very careful.
That's some really good advice, Mike. And ultimately what Mike is saying is buyer beware. And I appreciate you being so forthcoming and transparent. And I would also say, for whatever it's worth, now understand, Mike, you have a lot of experience, of course, in this space. I have a lot of experience in this space. So I'm not recommending for you to do this at home, especially if you're not comfortable and don't have a ton of experience. But I can tell you firsthand, Mike, I've bought cards out of collections in global holders and valued them appropriately and cracked out the ones that I thought were going to be able to be graded by PSA or SGC. Now, I am grateful for the skill set I developed through the years, but my percentage is very high. So what I try to tell folks is, you don't have to be a card expert, Mike. I want to see if you agree with this, to look at a card in a holder and think, you know what? I've handled a lot of T206s, or I've handled a lot of 1948 Leaf football, and this card looks small to me. If you have a bad inkling about it, if you have a bad feeling, what my advice is to stay away. However, if you're at a show, especially if it's in that collector grade, I'll use those two issues again. If you're looking at a T206 Hall of Famer and a 3, we all kind of know what a 3 looks like. Mike, you guys graded a lot of 06s back in the day at Global. And plenty of them are going to be able to be cracked out and graded accordingly. It might not be the same grade, right? Grading standards have changed. But it's still going to receive a number. It might be a 2.5, it might be a 3.5, a 3, whatever the case is. So my point is, on the one hand, buyer beware, but on the other hand, there might be opportunity out there for the folks that are savvy and are willing to gamble just a little bit.
Sure. I agree. I think that the comfortability is if you have it in hand too, like when you referenced, being at a show, that's important. If you're looking in the ether on the internet and you think you can determine a comfortability level to then buy a product like that, that's been out of business, and you can't measure it in person, or you're trying to get a feel for it digitally, that's where, if you're even thinking, I would be cautious about anybody's product out there. It's you always want to try, and I know there's so much transactionality is happening now through the internet digitally, So it's a lot of everyone's relying on the grading services to do their job as best as they can do, so that the downside is almost nil, or hopefully nil, in terms of
Listen, you're right. We've come a long way. We're all more educated. We do have better systems. Transactionality is way up. There's a lot more platforms. There's less friction. But you're right. We are still depending on the grading companies to do their best job possible.
Yeah, 100%.
So speaking of which, the new company that you've started, I want to make sure that we address it properly here. It is MBA. It's called Mike Baker Authenticated.
Yes.
Now, Mike, as we get into it, I have lots of questions. Where do folks find out information on how to utilize your services from MBA?
Our website's mbadiamond.com is the website where you would need to go to find out anything you want to find out, and to then submit any of the items that we provide services for. For whatever reason, we get a lot of emails on the website. We also get a lot of interaction on Instagram too, which our handle on there is MBA Diamond. And we get a lot of real-time stuff. I think there's people that are just more on Instagram than they are like a website traditionally. So, totally. Education, informational wise speaking or whatever, it's Instagram seems to be kind of the key for that. But yeah.
I want to throw this out there. So if you're not on IG, I advise following MBA Authenticated. And the reason why, one of my most fun pieces of content that I enjoy personally in the card space on IG is when Mike, and I don't know if it's you or a staff member, of course, but I mean MBA takes a card that recently sold at auction.
Yep.
And, we all know that this 8 would have sold for X. And you're like, listen, it had the sticker, which we're going to get into in a minute. And it's a higher end example for the grade than normal. And that card sold for 136% more than the previous time that card sold. Mm-hmm. And so where I want to kind of start with MBA and what's going on with grading is, Mike, we of course know that eye appeal is super important. And I think for most folks that are serious about collecting, whether it be in vintage or modern, they've certainly heard this notion recent time. But something that's, I think, still harder for folks to maybe grasp, that kind of like were in it in the 90s or early 2000s, but maybe making their way back now, is that, well, wait a minute, not all 8s are created equal, or not all 9s are created equal. And so it's hard to explain to someone who has a Michael Jordan 86 Flea or the number 57 card, hey, listen, you got a PSA 9, it's legit, but it's like a little bit off-centered for the grade. I'd prefer one that's a little bit more centered. And I've had folks, I'm sure, Mike, you've had the same experiences. What do you mean? It's just out of the pack like that. Sir, no one's saying you did anything wrong. Believe me. But the joking aside, Mike, I know, and I want to make sure, rather than me try to explain it, that you could explain it to folks. One of the things that I enjoyed in the last 12 months that I've learned to utilize for my business, Just Collect, professionally, but then also personally as a collector, is I more so do it at the card shows, as you know, we've been interacting, is I'll take, doesn't necessarily have to be an 8 or a 9. I have a 33 Gaudi PSA 5 Lou Gehrig right now, which is dead nut centered and looks really good for the grade. So can you explain to the listeners of Trading Card Therapy that if you have a high-end card for the grade, and of course it has some real value to it, what are the different services that you offer with this sticker? And I say that with quotations, Mike, because we're trying to educate folks. And if you already know about the MBA Diamond stickers, great. You're probably doing very well. And, really the more power to you. But what I'm trying to do is I want to make sure that, because I feel like, Mike, there's a lot of fringe collectors that we have in here that have valuable cards. Mm-hmm. They might not have any idea what you or I are talking about right now. So if you could shed some light on that particular service or services that MBA offers, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. First of all, MBA is coming up on its 5-year anniversary this summer. So when we say new company, I know it feels new because there's a lot of collectors, like you said, that are aware of it. There's so much information and so much content out there. And I think things, not just but things just kind of get lost in translation a little bit. So doing these types of podcasts with you and others and educating people on the value of what MBA is bringing to the table in terms of trying to illustrate a normal 8, which is a near intimate, let's say PSA 8, looks great, most likely 65-35 or better, even though the range is 65-35 to 70-30, I think generally today, I think we're looking at cards that are 65-35 or better. And what we've done at MBA is tighten that up just a little bit so that cards, not only on the front, but also the back, centering wise, are dead nuts, like you said about your Gehrig. And when that's achieved and it goes through that process, because we're not just looking at for eye appeal and just go, hey, that looks like a great card. We're actually looking at the card, the corners, the edges, the surface, front and back, and incorporating that whole kind of algorithm, and then deciding based on the standard to apply a silver sticker, which is an eye appeal sticker, saying this is a great 8 for the grade, or a gold sticker, which is basically is implying that it's a half point or better. So we by putting a gold sticker on a card, previously graded card, we're saying it's an 8.5. And the black diamond sticker that we have is subjugated to just 10s. So that is for the premier of 10s. So Beckett has their black label. We have our MBA black diamond sticker, which is taking cards, PSA's grading standard. They don't have a pristine, and they don't have a black label. So they have gem mint. And within that gem mint range, there are absolutely gem mint cards, and then there are absolutely better than gem mint cards. And we're highlighting that. And every card that gets submitted to us for that service is scanned front and back. It's annotated into our database. And so we have a population report that's been going on 5 years. And so people can see, hey, I got this Ken Griffey Jr. 89 upper deck PSA 10 gold. And you can go into our website, check it out, enter the cert, and pop up. It'll pull up the graph for how many of those have been silver, gold, or blacked. And then based on that, you can determine, or not determine, the market will determine what they're going to go for, obviously. But I think people have a really good idea where we are now because there's a lot more data. It's really hard when we first started to say, hey, this card's going to sell for 136% more than the other, light graded card, because there was no data to prove that. And it really just took time. And a lot of our information, I think, that's been out there, and people who haven't used us, even if they're aware of us, I think they've been waiting to see some of that data come through. And now that data is absolutely there, and it's showing pretty consistently that with a sticker, you are making a little bit more than you were without it.
So if I understood you correctly, Mike, there is a pop report to know how many silver and gold stickers there are, for example, for vintage cards.
Yes, 100%.
Oh, that's awesome. So at the very least, I just learned something on the program, and I'm sure other folks may have not known this either, Mike. I didn't know that, because as I've started to utilize your service, I was thinking I wonder how many nice 33 Gaudy Gehrigs are considered nice for the grade of 5.
Yep. If you enter your cert number for that card, or for a card that you have with a sticker on it, it'll show you exactly what we've done in each category of sticker that we offer for that card. So
I think this is great because, and let's be candid here, right? I think it's like anything else. I play a lot of tennis. There's some people who play the same amount of tennis as me, and they're not as good as me. And there's some people who play the same amount of tennis as me, and they're better than me. So what I'm saying is, I understand there's no shame, is what I'm saying. And like, if you don't think your eyes are as good as the next person, what I like is that's literally what your service does. And I want to make sure that folks understand how this can play out in real time, because I was just thinking about this, Mike. So on the collector side, so if you're at a show and you came to my booth and you said, hey, Leighton, I really like this 05 Cobb, and you're telling me it's high end for the grade. Mm-hmm. Take a look at it, buddy, right? It's right in front of you. And, maybe it's an older gentleman. Doesn't necessarily have 20/20 vision anymore, 20/30 vision, right? And, of course, I'm making some jokes here, but I'm also trying to create a real situation. What I am thinking about doing now in the future, Mike, at big shows, like the National, I know you'll be there. I don't know if you're in Philly. I don't quite remember. But I know you're at a variety of shows across the country. And so what I would advise in that situation, right, if you're the collector, ask the dealer if you could show it to your contacted MBA. And if it was me, meaning the dealer, and I'm talking to the person, and I'm trying to earn their trust, sir, I tell you what, let's walk over together. I'm going to introduce you to my friend Mike Baker of MBA Authenticated. And to be clear, I'm going to pay for this service. You don't have to buy the card, but I'm so confident that my card is high end for the grade, and I haven't submitted it yet, so you don't have to take my word for it, because we're going to submit it now. Yep. And I am planning to submit this and others, to be clear, in the future. And so what I like about that, Mike, is you're now taking in a separate set of eyes that's impartial, right? Because I'm not paying you enough money that you're going to be swayed one way or the other, Mike. You have a reputation to uphold. As we now know, MBA is 5 years old, and I do apologize for saying it's a new company, but I appreciate you laughing and such. And so anyway, getting back to center, I think it's such a wonderful win-win for people at a convention to know. And I think if we talked about nothing else today, Mike, this is a huge thing for the hobby to understand, because I don't think folks are doing this. I had someone at Philly. I don't think you were at Philly. He said he was looking around for an 86 Lear Jordan 9. And we had one by you that was already, I don't want to screw it up. I think it was a gold, but maybe it's a silver. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't quite ready to pay the premium yet. And maybe he'll never be able to or never feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. But at the very least, I explained it to him in such a way that he understood this is no longer me talking. And by the way, it's not even PSA talking.
Right.
You as the collector should be happy because you're literally getting another set of eyes. Now, I'm not suggesting you can't do it on a $500 card or a $200 card because, Mike, I know you have services and various pricing across the board, which I think is awesome. I discovered that myself. I was almost embarrassed to offer you. I'm like, Mike, I have this card. It's $500. I don't even know if we could do it. You're like, Leighton, it's $15. I don't want to misquote. It was something very reasonable. Yeah. I'm like, oh, well, I definitely want to know if this card is high end for the grade. Yeah. And so my point is, gang, if you're listening to this, MBA is in your corner. So if you're a dealer, they're literally in your corner. And if you're a collector, if you're working with a nice, upstanding dealer, they're going to want to make sure that you're comfortable and happy with what you're buying. So to me, Mike, this is a wonderful way to utilize your service on the floor live at any convention moving forward where you're going to be set up at.
Yeah, absolutely. And the majority of the people, once they've already had the kind of trauma of sending their valuable card to a grading service, getting it back in plastic, and then to send that off again is definitely friction for us. So having it done in person is definitely where we kind of do a lot more business. We do good business with the mail, but if we were everywhere at one point, we would be doing a lot more of the plastic that's out there for sure. And if you think about it, there's, I don't know, 80+ million units of plastic of grading services that we provide that service for. So it doesn't take a percentage of that to really move the needle to get the brand out there on a much larger scale. One of the things that we just launched, I say just launched, it was right before Thanksgiving, and we're calling it the digital review. So for not $10, you can take a front image or a back image or URL from an auction and upload that. And within 48 hours, you'll receive a likely candidate or likely not, or not a candidate, basically. And if it receives the candidacy, basically it helps you vet, which then you can figure out which cards you want to send to us, or wait till we're at a show to give us in person. If it's not a candidate, it'll say in grader notes, upper left corner tip, centering top to bottom exceeds the parameters for the grade, or it'll give you helpful notes as to why it's not a candidate. Not saying it's not an 8, but just saying it's not a candidate for an MBA. So it's really helpful. We've gotten a lot of business off of that. And in fact, a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from it has basically been from the nose, because they finally understood why their card is what it is. So the grader notes are definitely key. We call it heat mapping with us. With the diamond certification, once the plastic comes in, you can go log into the site, enter the cert number, go down a little bit, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see exactly where highlighted with a yellow dot where the area of concern lies. So if it's in a corner, it would be there. If it's a scratch on the surface, you'll see a yellow box there, or an edge, whatever it may be, basically. So it helps identify, what are the issues with the card.
So much good stuff wrapped up in this. Mike, I want you to know, of course, I'm grateful for you joining us today. And I have a couple more things I want to cover. But I'm going to continue to not just talk about MBA, but I'm actually going to offer to clients of Just Collect for this year's National, which is going to be taking place in Chicago. If you're local in the state of New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, and you'd like to make an appointment with me before we, meaning my team from Just Collect, goes out to the National, if you have some cards that you would like MBA, Mike Baker Authenticated, to take a look at on premises at the National this summer because you can't make it, I will personally make sure that I take those cards and escort them out to Chicago. And Mike, I'm sure we'll have a bunch of business to do this summer. I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds great, Leighton. That's awesome.
So I wanted to just touch upon a couple other things with MBA. And I don't know if this is necessarily going to be the right order, but I know myself, I'm curious about this. And I'm going to bring up kind of one example where I know it works, but another example where I'm not sure, and I want you to provide some clarity. So now you talked about the black diamond authentication sticker only being for 10s. So that makes sense to me. And I also understand, however, not every 10 is created equal. I do get that. I've been cards long enough. And so on the more obvious front, I'll use an 89 Upper Deck Griffey as to where it's very obvious to me that a card could be a PSA 10, but maybe doesn't receive the black diamond, sticker from you guys. So I've seen a fair amount of PSA 10 Griffies where the hologram on the back, Mike, especially under a 10-time loop, it's not crisp. It's not flush against it. And for me personally, I don't like that on my 89 Upper Deck Griffey. So the 10 that I have in my collection, it doesn't have the sticker, but I know that it does have no issue with that particular hologram. So for me, it's very obvious why I would like to have an NBA black diamond on an 89 Upper Deck Griffey and a 10. But this is where it's a little bit less obvious for me. And I'm hoping you can provide clarity to me and our audience. So take I think the 98 finest Peyton Manning was let's just say the refractor, or maybe either way, the refractor or the base card. I think it was a borderless card. I don't think there was, centering. So centering is, of course, harder to find on that card. Or take a Tim Duncan finest rookie, which is back in the day, the easiest card to get a 10 on, right? How do you take a finest or a chrome 10 and discern, meaning if it's well centered, you don't see lines, to me, they're all the same. So I'm hoping you can provide some clarity on that, why we should consider using MBA.
Well, in those cases where there's not clearly defined borders, we go off as logos or locations of areas where, the Topps Finest logo on the upper left, maybe the nameplate at the bottom. And, some of the nameplates will be slammed at the bottom. Some of the logos will be hiked up to the top, much like the Kaboom for the Wemby card. There will never be a 9 or a 10 because however it was manufactured, I think 8 or 7 is the highest it's ever going to get because just the way it lined up on the card. So it really comes down on a case-by-case basis, but there are identifiable factors to elevate the card to a black diamond relative to where we are identifying the logo and the nameplate, or maybe a foot, on a Washington logo, say on the lower left, and it's kind of the W, the cursive writing, the W is off, or we've seen copies where it's on. So we identify that as the copy. So we do a lot of homework, especially with all these new issues, to ensure that once a sticker is going on, we're not looking back or looking in the rearview mirror about, oh, did we make a mistake? So I know.
Now, listen, Mike, very, very impressive. And really, you talked about it before, and now I could see all the dots connecting. Sometimes the no from you guys is actually the real education. Because even though you maybe lost a few dollars on submitting that card for the NBA sticker in whatever case, by getting back really detailed grader's notes, and in some cases they get the opportunity to talk to you, the head honcho, which is awesome, folks. So I think this is all really invaluable. And to be clear, I'm sure if you wanted to see NBA schedule, you could go on their website and find out what conventions they're going to. And I'd also bet if you had a ton of cards, if you told them that you were going to make a big submission at a convention that they weren't going to, I'm just guessing they might consider working it into their schedule. So reach out to Mike and his team if you have a lot of cards that you're thinking about getting evaluated. And of course, as I mentioned, I here at Just Collect will help you if you'd like to get some of your cards evaluated this summer at the National Sports Collectors Convention if you're not able to make it. One of the other things I wanted to ask you, Mike, because I don't know if I read it properly, is NBA now starting grading of cards?
Yes, we should be launching. That should be hitting the market here within the next couple of weeks. It's been a long, arduous R&D project. We've been wanting to do it for quite a while, and it's finally come to fruition. Not only that, we're also going to get back into unopened material. The pack holder is awesome. Pokemon pack holder is awesome. There's no more folds on the pack, so the whole foil pack will be, taut as it was meant to be, coming straight out of a box. So packaging wise, it's awesome. I think everything that we're adding to it, the transparency in terms of grader notes and heat mapping, and being communicative about where issues lie. If we were just saying no, it wouldn't be as impactful. Walking away with just a no kind of pisses you off. Walking away with some knowledge definitely adds a parachute to the kind of frustration that it didn't get what you thought it might get. But we're there to add that parachute, provide that kind of transparency and clarity to whatever the issue is or isn't. So it found it very, very helpful. When we started this project 5 years ago, we definitely wanted to make transparency and make the communication the kind of the focus, the tip of the spear of what we're all about. So, and obviously, coming on and adding stickers to a previously graded product, that had its own say no to sticker type of momentum when we first started. It was kind of
totally. I remember it, Mike, very well.
Yeah, we were grading the graders, and a sticker, and what does this mean? And the antithesis to that was it's been done in coins forever, and wildly successful, to the point where PCGS actually uses the CAC sticker in coins and reweighted the entire coin registry based on the sticker. So if you have a 64 and it has a sticker, you're going to be a little bit higher in the the registry game, so to speak. So I've been asked, do you think PSA or one of the grading services would ever do that, or employ the MBA sticker into their weighted algorithm to create the GPA? All I can say is I hope so someday. But for now, we'll keep working hard and keeping what MBA does best, which is providing that transparency, providing the knowledge and whatnot. I don't think there's too many people out there that can provide more knowledge than myself, at least on the grading end, and guys like you who've been around it from day one to see how it's grown from a little seedling to this massive oak tree. So it's cool.
No, I think it's fantastic, Mike. And really, the thing that I'm taking away from the discussion about grading in general, but in particular MBA Authenticated, is you've decided that whatever you're going to embark on at MBA as far as grading, stickers, authentication, is you're going to try to encompass transparency as part of that. And really, it's a testament to you, Mike, because you could have very easily figured out on day 100 of your business, MBA, we could start using these cheap slabs and roll out some grading, but you didn't. And really, I'll be honest, when I first heard about your grading, I'm like, Mike, I don't know if this is a good idea. It's getting away from your core competency, and being honest, right? But I can now see, this is what I always tell folks, and I kind of feel like you might be able to do the same for MBA. So if someone gets together with me, especially if I'm not charging for my services, when I tell them, if they're getting me to look at their cards and appraise them, that we may not buy them, you may not even like me. I'll probably get you to laugh. But what I can tell you undoubtedly is that you are going to leave our meeting better off than you started.
Yeah.
And so what I feel like what we're really saying, the same thing with MBA, which is at this point, if you now have an ungraded card, you want to get it graded. And I'm not saying, to be clear, gang, I'm not saying to go to PSA, go to MBA instead of PSA to get your cards graded. Because let's be honest, you got to be careful out there and understand the market. But I like what Mike's saying. Let's say you have an issue and you're doing it for posterity. It was a set you loved when you were a kid, and you just want to get 10s. And you've been submitting in the PSA and you get 6s and you get 8s, which, let's be honest, I've done that and I'm a professional. So my point is, I like that graders' notes are going to be coming in, not just on the most expensive card submitted, because I think that's what PSA currently does. And you're willing to share the knowledge. You understand, Mike, you might share knowledge with someone and they take that card and get it graded with PSA, which is a competitor of yours. Mm-hmm. But I like that you understand. It's like the same philosophy I have. Not everyone's going to sell me their cards. But if I do the right thing, if I provide them value, if they leave our transaction and our relationship better off than they started, undoubtedly we're going to get some business coming back our way. And I think that you've been employing that philosophy at MBA.
100%. MBA started literally in August of 2020, right when COVID started. So there was no, like the Dallas show was the only show that was even open for business. And to try to even educate people on why they should do business with us and then send that card through the mail was just like a non-starter. Like you had to be in Dallas to explain what the hell this new concept was coming, even though it was being done by PWCC at the time with the iPill sticker. It wasn't different. It was different. It was in their ecosystem. Ours was, we were hoping that it would get into every major auction house, which it has, thankfully. So
it has. No, Mike,
yeah.
kudos to you really and your team. I think I met your partner and some of your team at the shows.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one last question before I do. What's the next convention that you're going to be at that folks can find you and your gang?
Right now, we're slated for the National, as confirmed. We chose to go to Dallas 2 weeks ago. It was kind of impromptu. We had like maybe less than a month heads up on that during the holidays and whatnot. I will say the Dallas show was incredibly busy. I couldn't believe how many people were there. I was blown away. It reminded me of COVID times, actually, in terms of the volume. But whether or not we do a show upcoming prior to the National, we'll definitely let everybody know through IG and our website. Right now, we've been kind of, hunkered down with the new products and services that are coming to launch, finally coming to fruition. So that's kind of where our attention span's been with that, as opposed to being physically at a show.
Sure. So the last thing I wanted to cover, Mike, was provenance. As you and I both know, being veterans in the hobby for quite some time, provenance in memorabilia, in that world, very important. Provenance in sports cards, some people like it. Some people are like, doesn't matter. And so I recently had on Brady Hill. We talked about the All-Star Cafe T206 Wagner, which of course has its own story attached to it. It was owned by Charlie Sheen. Yep. There was a robbery. The FBI was involved. I mean, all sorts of wild stuff. Yep. And then I'm also talking about amazing collectors from yesteryear, like Lionel Carter, and cards that have been denoted from his collection. So I'm curious, Mike, in your opinion, both as from a collector standpoint, because I know you're a collector as well, but then also from, a business standpoint, do you feel that provenance is important in cards? And if so, are you seeing some more folks care about where their high grade such and such came from, or that this card is from the Lionel Carter collection, so on and so forth? I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, provenance, I 100% agree with you that provenance is important. We have to make sure, though, that even that provenance is vetted and that it's not created stories to improve the collectability or value of the item. I like authentication provenance personally. I like, if I was going to go buy a Babe Ruth ball, I would like to have PSA, DNA, JSA, and Beckett, have all three of them sign off on it. So it's like, there's no question that this is an awesome ball, and there's not going to be any confusion or controversy about any one authenticator saying something different than the other authenticator said. So that kind of provenance to me is where it's at. I think, other provenance, you just don't see it. From a grading perspective, I'm sure PSA, they would love every collector to have their own tag on there, because eventually someone would buy it and wouldn't want that tag on it. So it'd be a big, reshuffle reholder game or whatever. But there's only so much you can put on the certification label to denote a Collins collection or, the Hendricks collection, et cetera. But for those that PSA makes or affords that, I think SGC does too. For the collections or the level of the collection or that card that deserves to be done, I think it's been done on a case-by-case basis that way. It's not just so Leighton Sheldon collection can just go on there. Most times it won't even fit, even if they would allow it. I think digitally through a QR code on the certification label, if you wanted to see it digitally, that could be done so that there's no harm, no foul. So people could see it, commemorating or memorializing your piece. And if they wanted to keep it because there was some cool backstory with it, then so be it. But it wouldn't have to be like kind of the grading shuffle or the reholder shuffle going back to the service. So I think that could be probably figured out for collectors that wanted to have their card memorialized. I mean, maybe your firstborn son's first card, and it says Christmas 2025 type thing or something like that. I don't know. Definitely not on a label, but definitely digitally could be done. So
sure. Now listen, Mike, there's some great ideas wrapped up in there, and I kind of want to address two different ones. So number one, on the Ruth ball, certainly if I'm buying a $300,000 Babe Ruth ball that's signed and it's high grade, I'll be honest, I definitely want it authenticated by, let's say, the three majors, right? PSA, Beckett, and JSA.
Yep.
But I'll tell you, equally as important, if not more important, like I would rather have it just only have a PSA letter if I also knew the lineage of the ball.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's been in the same family for 87 years. It's only had two owners. To me, that's kind of what I was referring to on cards.
Yeah.
And so I really love what you were saying. So, for example, the Hendricks collection or Lionel Carter, I agree. First of all, it's not going to always fit on the label. Second of all, it's not always practical, right? No one's going to buy something from the Leighton Sheldon collection, the Mike Baker collection, so on and so forth. We hope, but I doubt it.
Right.
However, what I become a fan of, and maybe this is just because I'm also a softie and I have a 10-year-old son, but I share the stories with my son about the journey, about the history behind such and such collection. And last year, my son and I went on our first ever deal together. He didn't know, but we were on vacation, and we ended up buying a T206 collection. And that video is on my YouTube channel under Just Collect. And so the reason I'm bringing it up is we kept the John McGraw out of that collection. And I know it's low grade, Mike, and I know it's not anything special or worth a lot of money, but man, I would love to have a QR code on the PSA label that goes to blog.justcollect.com. So at the very least, right, you're sitting around the campfire in 17 years, or when your dad's an old man and he's 93 and he's barely functioning. Remember this, Dad? Exactly, Mike. But like that's what I'm saying. The hobby's supposed to be fun. So like I love what Nat and PSA are doing with a lot of different things using technology. I'm not saying this for the sake of Just Collect. I think people care about where their items come from. And so even if it's not on the label, I love your QR code. I'd like to find out a way that we can share the story more easily and with less friction across the life cycle of that particular card, that it goes with that card.
Right. No, the technology is there to do that. And the ideas clearly are there. It's just the implementation. So if it gets enough drive, then all of a sudden when you ask about, hey, what's the dev lift on doing this? And you ask any of these companies in our space, it's always crazy. Q2, Q3 next year, because developmental lift to change things of an existing, framework is not as easy as I would think it would be. Like, hey, just go ahead and add this to it. No big deal.
Sometimes of course. Are you kidding me, Mike? Yeah. Hey, listen, you're familiar with Office Space? They got a lot of TPS reports.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got a lot to get through.
Right. Therein lies the thing. So I guess if some of the greatest ideas can come right now, we can do that. And then it has to just, hey, let's kick the can, and then we'll be talking about this in 6 months. Hopefully not. Hopefully this starts a conversation, especially within the collecting community, because through podcasts, through their channels and IG and all the good stuff out there, if there's enough movement to move the needle to make that development time, afforded to that, things do change. And sometimes the things that I think might take a little long internally with our company take 5 seconds, and our developers will be like, change while you're watching it change. And then other things will be, oh, that's going to be a while, so you can just kind of take the good with the bad. But, I will definitely put this on our dev list to include a remembrance or memorialization of, or, digitally so it associates with that cert number. So if you look it up, it could say the Leighton Sheldon collection, or your son's, campfire experience or whatever. So we could probably do something like that. Yeah.
Well, Mike, this has been both entertaining and educational, which is my goal. And so thank you so much for joining me today on Trading Card Therapy. I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Leighton.
Take care. I'll talk to you soon, bud.
You bet. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, that is our 89th episode of Trading Card Therapy. I'm extremely grateful and appreciative, not only for everyone tuning in, but over the last 14 episodes, I've had 14 amazing guests. And I said last year when I started this at episode 75, we're going to get 25 guests until we hit episode 100. And I've hoped along the way that every guest has been both entertaining and educational. And I think Mike Baker of MBA today nailed it. If you think so, let me know in the comments. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And until next time, folks, this is the Dr. Leighton Sheldon signing off.